everybody, and welcome to the Backbone Podcast, where common sense still makes sense in a world that is sick and getting sicker. And if you're paying attention to anything that's going on in the news today, you'll know that are beginning to spiral out of control. As I broadcast to you right now on Thursday evening, preemptive strikes from Israel, according to the New York Post, have begun in Tehran, Iran. This is not good, because Israel cannot complete this mission of destroying Iran by themselves. They don't have the capabilities of doing it. They're going to try and drag our friends, neighbors, and relatives who are in the U.S. military into their war, which should not be allowed. Trump should not allow this. This should not happen. American people shouldn't be dying for a foreign country for their own agenda. But that's not what the broadcast is about tonight. Tonight, I wanted to dedicate this show to a tortured genius. I don't like using the word genius too much. I think that we use that far too often with people who don't deserve it. But Brian Wilson, who was let's be honest, he was the founder of the Beatles. He created the Beach Boys, way back in 1961 out of Hawthorne, California. Passed away yesterday at the age of 82. Now, yesterday I wasn't able to do a podcast because I was running around all day long, and I also had a scholarship event to go to. I was presenting a few scholarship awards, representing a club and a charity that I belong to. So I wasn't able to do a podcast yesterday. I was exhausted by the time I got home at 10 o'clock. But I wanted to do this today, and then we'll get back to the current events and pop culture stuff later. But I wanted to give Mr. Wilson his due, because he gave me so many wonderful moments listening to his music. I'm a Beach Boy fan. I know people laugh at that because they're kind of seen now as a kooky group. You know, they had those funny shirts. They look like Holocaust shirts with the blue and white stripes. But their music, his music, is unparalleled. He created a new style, and they called it the California song or California music. And when you listen to Brian Wilson, who, as I said, passed away at the age of 82 yesterday, we don't know how, but that's not important. I mean, if the family doesn't want to let that known, they shouldn't have to. But when you listen to Brian Wilson, when you listen to the Beach Boys, it didn't matter if it was a February 20-degree, snowy, crappy night in the Bronx, or if you were in Hawthorne, California, you felt like you were on the beach, surrounded by beautiful blondes in bikinis, and with muscle cars driving up and down the lane. That music transformed you. It morphed you back from a little boy in the 80s and 90s in the Bronx to 1960s California, when it was beautiful. California isn't beautiful now, as we know, unfortunately. But the band was founded by Wilson in 1961, as I said, out of Hawthorne, California. And he had his brothers, Carl and Dennis Wilson. Dennis Wilson, if you are a Charlie Manson fan, befriended Manson many, many years ago, before the Manson murders, obviously. And I think, please leave in the comments if I'm incorrect, I believe that Dennis Wilson lived in the house that Roman Polanski and Sharon Tate owned during that horrible night that made the Manson family notoriously famous. Also, they had Mike Love, who was the cousin of Brian Wilson, and Al Jardine, who was the singer who Brian Wilson would later hate, detest. Now, Wilson wrote and produced and arranged and performed almost all, probably all of the songs that were there. And if you're into like production like I am, he was considered the first, or maybe one of the first, musical production auteurs, meaning that he had everything to do with how the records were produced, the songs were arranged, sound engineering, all that stuff. The man had one of the great ears in music. Bob Dylan, I think, was quoted as saying, "The man has his ear is so brilliant that it should be in the Smithsonian." He had a tendency at a very early age to learn by ear, which is not obviously something that it could happen with anybody, right? These are special people. Once the band started getting going, they took off immediately. I mean, they had over 24 top 40 hits in the US. And they had number one songs left and right. Surf City, I Get Around, Help Me Rhonda, Good Vibrations. But his magnus opus was, of course, the 1966 record called Pet Sounds, which I believe, in my humble opinion, and many people argue with me that it's not, I think it's the greatest English language rock album of all time. There is not one song on there that's a clunker. And usually, like, you get, and listen, I'm a big Pink Floyd fan. I've seen them many times. And I know that there are Beatle fanboys out there and Bob Dylan fanboys out there. And I have friends that are big Zeppelin and Queen fans. This album was special because it didn't sound like anything before, and it doesn't sound like anything since. There's no one that could replicate that album. There are very few bands you can say that about. We can sit down and listen to a Beatles record, whatever it is, Revolver, the White Album, Sgt. Pepper, whatever you want to say, and I can tell you can almost point out that there was a huge influence by Buddy Holly, maybe even to, dare I say, a bit of a copy of Buddy Holly and the Crickets. I mean, John Lennon, for God's sakes, looked like the man. He dressed like him. But I'm not here to shit on the Beatles. But Pet Sounds was totally different. And it was lauded at that time. And there was one of the great songs that people really don't talk about all that much. You don't really hear it on the radio all that much. But it was called Caroline No. And that was a song that Brian Wilson, in many interviews that I've seen with him, said that was the greatest song he ever wrote. And it's brilliant. It's a fantastic record. Unfortunately, though, like many people of higher artistic standards, he suffered from mental illness. He suffered from depression, even schizophrenia. He had a nervous breakdown, in his biography, I think it said 1964. And the group just he did not continue to tour and in live shows. What he did do was he continued writing and producing, and he got into drugs, and he, from those drug-related experiences, he claims that that's how Pet Sounds came about. His mental health by the late 1960s affected his productivity. And this led to periods of reclusion and overeating, and of course substance abuse, because once drugs gets involved, it's pretty much downhill from there. And he disassociated himself from the band. Eventually the band just went on without him, and which hurt it, he didn't say this out loud, but that hurt him. Because I think when you give these guys, and he gave those guys careers. Were they good musicians? Were they good singers? Could they perform? Absolutely. Would they have been the Beach Boys without him? No. And I think when you see these guys touring and making money and being famed and lauded for and singing the songs that you wrote, produced, arranged, because nobody else could do it like you, it's got to hurt because those are your babies that you're hearing out loud. And there was resentment. Of course there was. You wouldn't be human if there wasn't. He did make a bit of a comeback, or at least tried to in the late 70s. And he did tour again, and he did make some more music around the 1999 2000 period. And he toured, he was a solo artist for the next 20 years. I never got to see him, unfortunately. It was just not in the cards, but I don't think he toured all that much. But he did make a incredible contribution to music, creating that California sound. In the 1940s, 1930s was mostly Bing Crosby. In the 1940s, you had the war, but you had Sinatra, right? From around 1938 to 1949. Then Sinatra's career went down the tubes until he made the greatest comeback in entertainment media history by winning the Academy Award for From Here to Eternity. And then in the 1950s, it was him, Sinatra, and of course, the world was introduced to Elvis Presley in 1955. And those two guys in the 1950s, and there were other artists, believe me, but nobody was bigger than those two guys, just made record after record after record that were lauded. Sinatra had, God, 6 records in a row that were just classic, 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 boom, 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 boom. You don't get that today. And it's unfair to say that because there's no Sinatra today. There's no Dean Martin today. There's no Brian Wilson today. There's no Elvis. But in the 60s, when things started to change, the British invasion came in, and the Beatles, the Beach Boys were the American standard. They were our band. They represented, even though they were very, again, they were from California, and there was no doubt about it. They represented Americana. They liked, girls in bikinis. They liked muscle cars. They liked surfing. They were good. And they really, really were the anti-British invasion, or I should say, hippie movement. Because they talked in their songs, you can feel, or in Brian Wilson's songs, you could feel that he loved where he was from. He didn't want to go anywhere else. One of his famous songs were, California Girls, right? He loved the women around there. And once the British invasion came in, especially the Beatles, it affected him because he was, these guys were worried that these British guys are going to take over. So he put the pedal to the metal. Did he languish? Did he sulk and say it's unfair? No, he stepped it up. And in 1964, they came out with a single called "I Get Around," which was a #1 hit. And that single, once it became a #1 hit and knocked the Beatles out of the #1 spot, it created this rivalry in the media an unofficial rivalry between the Beach Boys and the Beatles, particularly between Wilson and McCartney. And oh my God, I forget the name of that record that came out that year. But the song "Don't Worry Baby" was on there. Oh God, I think was the name of the album "Don't Worry Baby." It might have been Volume 2, it might have been that, which is which is a phenomenal song. And Wilson had always said that Caroline No and Don't Worry Baby were the two songs that he thought were the best. He also thought that Don't Worry Baby was the best record they ever made, which is, I mean, kind of contradicts what I said. But anyway, Brian Wilson knows more than I do. But in '64, they started their a U.S. tour, and on that U.S. tour, he suffered a breakdown, and this was over stress, of course. He had recently gotten married, and Wilson played a show in Houston, but he had to be replaced by another legend, a country legend named Glenn Campbell, for the rest of the tour. And I don't believe Brian Wilson ever toured again live with the Beach Boys after that. Now, of course, schizophrenia, mental illness, and depression were not as studied as they are today. I think today it's overstudied. I think it's overdiagnosed today. But back in the day, maybe if somebody had recognized this earlier, they could have helped him out. Maybe by helping him out, it would have suppressed his musical ability. Who knows? You know, God doesn't give us everything; He makes us fight for it. And he saw this genius in Brian Wilson, and he made him suffer in the light. But the Beach Boys, I'm from New York, and every 4th of July, the Yankees would have a ball game I would go to with my buddies, and right after the game, usually the Yankees lost. Right after the game, the Beach Boys would perform a concert, a 4th of July concert for everyone in the stadium, and it was great. The songs, I mean, everybody knew the songs. You know the songs. It's like apple pie and pancakes. It's what America's about. It's what makes America great, not the garbage we have today. And one of my kids asked me. It was my daughter's birthday the other day. We went out to dinner, and they were playing music in the car while I was driving, and I just can't take the music they listen to. And they said, you know, you're going to have to adjust. You always talk about us adjusting to things. You're going to have to adjust. And I said, well, I don't have to adjust. I have radio. There are plenty of classic rock radio stations where I can relive my youth there. And so my son asked, he says, do you think that there'll ever be like your type of music again? And I didn't fib, but I think maybe 25, 30 years from now, once this horror of Hollywood and the music industry has pretty much burned itself alive into a cinder, there'll be 4 guys in, you know, Nebraska somewhere in a garage who are going to pick up an old guitar and an old bass, maybe put together a drum set, and maybe we might have another Beach Boys. Maybe we might have another Van Halen or another Pink Floyd. But guys like Brian Wilson, geniuses like this, very, very accomplished musical producers like him, they don't come around very often. I don't care what you say about some of the people that are around today. People talk about this guy Kanye West. He is. It would be insulting to include him in the same breath as a Brian Wilson. Insulting. This guy was on a whole different level. Now, I'm not going to compare him to, guys like Vivaldi and Mozart, Bach, Beethoven, Puccini, Wagner. Those guys are celestial. They're in another. They're on another dimension, another galaxy. But for rock music, for good old fashioned rock music, this guy was on top of it. He was on top of it, and now he's gone. But his music isn't gone. That's the legacy. He leaves behind a wife, Miranda Ledbetter, I believe her name was. He was married to her for almost 30 years. He had 2 children, 7 children. He adopted 5. He had 2 biological children. As I said, 5 adopted, so God bless him for that. He was a generous person in that area. And he stayed out of the spotlight for many, many years. Some people, they just want to create and be left alone. They don't want the fame. They don't even want the money. They just want, whether it's music or paintings or their plays or their movies, they just want to be able to create the art and go home. They don't want the extras. Our Stoic friends, and there's no memo tonight. I've been slacking, but I will have one tomorrow. But the Stoics would have addressed his depression, and they also would have said that he was a man of high value, a man that was evolved, because he didn't need validation or gratification or any of the poison that destroys many celebrities or many people, many men. He created his art. He was very serious about it, maybe too serious about it. And he just wanted to be left alone. And some people in society will say, well, that's because he was mentally ill. Okay, maybe he did suffer from mental illness, yes. But there are some people who don't want the accolades. They don't want your fake false love. Because as we said before, the minute he showed any sort of weakness, the guys who profited off of him, including his brothers, his blood, they took his music and they ran with it for another 40 years. When John Bonham died, Led Zeppelin broke up, 1980, because they thought he was the heart and soul of the band. Now, of course, Plant and Page had a tour in 1994. They started, which was, for me personally, was one of the greatest summers of my life, because in 1994 I saw Floyd, Bon Jovi was performing. I went to Woodstock. The Eagles came back. That was the Hell Freezes Over tour. That was magnificent. God, how many concerts did I see? Aerosmith. Metallica was still touring. I mean, it was just an amazing Van Halen. It was just an amazing summer. 97 was also a good year. 99 was a great year. 97, I got to see. 94, I got to see Tom Petty and Stevie Nicks, which was awesome. 97, the Pink Floyd. I saw Roger Waters in 97, and I saw Fleetwood Mac, and they were phenomenal again. But for Brian Wilson, this humble little tribute to him, to you, sir. You're surfing up in the sky now. There's no more there's no more mental illness, there's no more pain, there's no more anxiety, there's no more depression. That's worldly hell. You're not there anymore. And if any of you suffer from this, and I know in this world where you have this manosphere, red pill bullshit, alpha male stuff, if you suffer from this, it doesn't mean you're weak. It's on the contrary. If you're dealing with this in silence, you are strong to a fault. Because as you know, men are responsible for all things and we have to endure. Women and children can cry and complain, but never men, because we'll be left behind. But not here. Not on the Backbone podcast. So if you have to vent, if you need any assistance, and of course, this is a global thing, it's all around the world, drop the comment in there. Tell us your story. Vent. Writing is the greatest, most therapeutic thing you can do. I do this podcast, I write, I draw, and I'm even trying to get the guts to pick up my guitar that I've had for many years that's been collecting dust and try to take some lessons. And I know I always emphasize that don't worry about starting, just start. So I have to take my own advice. But if you have any issues, air them out, write them out. Brian Wilson did, in a way. He wrote them out in the beautiful music. And listen to those songs. You get transformed into from wherever you are now in 2025 into the hell that is Los Angeles. You get transformed into 1960s California, where people were flocking to live. My parents almost moved out there when I was born in the mid 1970s. I almost moved out there with a buddy of mine when I graduated from college in 1996. Because it was the land of milk and honey. Not anymore, unfortunately. But as we close this out, we say adieu to you, Brian Wilson. Thank you for everything. Thank you for the music. Thank you for all the memories. He'll never be forgotten. He's immortal. Dying is not the end. It's, as they say, the beginning. And his music will live forever, and he's living forever in God's hands. All right, well, thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment, and share. Be careful out there, my friends. I don't know how long this is going to be, but it just seems like the next few weeks are going to be hell, and Satan is dancing because he's always busy. But we're men, and we endure, and we're responsible for all things, and we must, under all circumstances, stay calm, stay resolute, stay strong. Be a man, have a backbone, because masculinity and common sense are worth standing up for. We'll see you later.